In the North Atlantic, the ocean is completely black. There is no wind. The surface of the water is flat, mirroring the dark, moonless sky. Slicing through this silent void is the largest, most luxurious machine ever built by human hands. It is a floating palace of stained glass, heated swimming pools, Turkish baths, and ornate wood paneling, carrying the wealthiest people on Earth. They are sleeping in warm beds. They feel completely safe. But lurking in the freezing darkness, perfectly camouflaged by the still water, is a mountain of ancient ice. It weighs 500,000 tons, and it is waiting. The story of the Titanic is not a story of bad luck. It is a story of catastrophic human arrogance. A chain of fatal decisions made long before the ship even touched the water guaranteed its doom. If just one of these decisions had been reversed, 1,500 people would not have frozen to death in the middle of the ocean. To understand why the unsinkable ship sank, we must look past the glamour. We must look at the metal. We must look at the egos of the men who built her. 2 years earlier, inside a grand boardroom in Belfast, the fate of the passengers was officially sealed. The chairman of the White Star Line, Bruce Ismay, met with the ship's chief designers. They were building a legend. But legends require space. The original safety plans called for 48 lifeboats. Ismay thought they cluttered the beautiful upper deck. He argued that wealthy people do not pay to look at lifeboats. The number was slashed to just 16. 16 lifeboats for more than 2,000 people. It was perfectly legal under the outdated laws of the time. But it meant that before the ship even launched, more than 1,000 people were already mathematically condemned to die if she ever went down. But she was not supposed to go down. The ship was divided into 16 watertight compartments. If 4 of these compartments flooded, she would still stay safely afloat. But Ismay wanted grand staircases. He demanded massive open public spaces. To make room for this luxury, the height of the critical watertight bulkheads was drastically lowered to just 3 meters above the waterline. This meant if water severely breached the bow, it would simply spill over the top of one compartment and flood directly into the next, dragging the massive ship down piece by piece. Then there was the steel. The ship was simply too massive for modern hydraulic riveting machines to reach the tightly curved sections of the bow. The workers had to use manual labor, but wrought iron was far too tough for men to hammer by hand. So the builders switched to wrought iron. And not just any iron. Modern forensic investigations into the wreckage reveal a shocking truth. The shipyard ordered a lower grade of iron, a material known as number 3 iron, which was heavily filled with impurities known as slag. These tiny slag particles made the metal incredibly brittle. The very front of the ship, the part most likely to hit an obstacle, was stitched together with fundamentally weak metal. The Titanic was built with a fatal flaw hidden deep in its skin. While men in suits compromised on fundamental safety to increase luxury, nature was preparing a weapon. 10,000 years of snow compacted into a colossal glacier on the rugged coast of Greenland. 2 years before the Titanic set sail, a massive block of ice broke free and violently fell into the ocean. It weighed an unimaginable 2 million tons. Most icebergs melt quickly. They get trapped in shallow bays or are destroyed by warm ocean currents. But this one was different. A freak weather phenomenon created a protective thermal barrier around it. A freezing stream of water, the Labrador Current, perfectly insulated the iceberg from the warming effects of the Gulf Stream, Shielded from the heat, the iceberg steadily drifted south. Over 2 years, it traveled thousands of miles, shrinking but simultaneously hardening into dense granite-like glacial ice. By April 1912, it had moved further south than anyone historically thought possible. It drifted right into the busiest shipping lane in the world. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic left port. Captain Edward John Smith, a man famously known as the Millionaire's Captain, was at the wheel. He was under immense corporate pressure. The owners desperately wanted the ship to arrive in New York early. They wanted to prove to the global press that she was not just the biggest and most expensive ship, but the fastest. To do this, Captain Smith kept the massive vessel hurtling forward at 21.5 knots. This was near her absolute mechanical top speed. On April 14th, the danger became undeniably clear. The wireless radio room on the Titanic began receiving urgent messages from other ships traveling through the same waters. The warnings were stark. Icebergs ahead, vast fields of ice directly in their path. Throughout the day, the Titanic received at least 7 separate, distinct ice warnings. Captain Smith read some of these warnings. He even handed one of them directly to Bruce Ismay, the chairman, who casually tucked the warning paper into his pocket so the crew would not see it. They did not slow down. The captain falsely believed they could easily spot any danger in time to simply steer away. He even canceled the strictly scheduled lifeboat drill that morning without any explanation. The crew was entirely unrehearsed for a crisis. As night fell, the temperature plummeted to brutally below freezing. The ocean was completely calm. This was a disaster waiting to happen. Without wind creating waves that crash against the base of an iceberg, there is absolutely no white water to spot in the dark, and there was no moonlight to illuminate the ice. The lookouts in the crow's nest, stationed high above the deck, were peering into a pitch-black abyss. They were also visually impaired. Because of a last-minute crew change before leaving port, an officer was randomly reassigned off the ship. In his rush to leave, he accidentally took the key to the ship's binocular locker with him. The lookouts had to rely purely on their naked eyes. Cold wind whipped their unprotected faces at 25 miles an hour, causing their eyes to tear up and severely blurring their vision. They were flying blind at 40 kilometers an hour. There was one final chance to avoid the trap. Deep inside the ship, senior wireless operator Jack Phillips was exhausted. The wireless was a new luxury, mostly used by wealthy passengers to send personal telegrams back to the mainland. Phillips was entirely overwhelmed with a massive backlog of these trivial messages. Just miles away, another ship, the SS Californian, had stopped completely for the night because the surrounding ice was so thick and dangerous. The Californian's radio operator tried urgently to warn the Titanic. He sent a message directly into Phillips's ears. The signal was overwhelmingly loud because the ships were so incredibly close. Instead of taking the critical warning to the bridge, Phillips grew intensely angry. He snapped back, bluntly telling the Californian to shut up because he was busy sending passenger messages. Dismissed and insulted, the operator on the Californian simply turned off his radio and went to sleep. The only ship close enough to rescue everyone on board was now totally deaf to the outside world. The Titanic was completely alone. At 11:39 at night, lookout Frederick Fleet finally sees it. A massive dark shadow violently blocking out the stars. It's 30 meters high, standing perfectly level with his position in the crow's nest.
He rapidly strikes the warning bell 3 times. He lunges for the telephone to the bridge and screams that there is an iceberg dead ahead. First Officer William Murdoch has less than 45 seconds to determine the fate of thousands. He orders the ship to turn hard left and forcefully reverses the engines. It's a desperate, fatal maneuver. Because the ship is so massive and moving so incredibly fast, it is terrifyingly sluggish to turn. At exactly 11:40, the Titanic grazes the iceberg strictly along its right side.
To the passengers up on the luxurious decks, it barely feels like anything. A slight passing shudder, a quiet scraping sound. Some people sleep entirely right through it. First Officer Murdoch breathes a sigh of relief, thinking he has narrowly avoided a direct hit. But deep below the waterline, the brittle, slag-filled iron rivets cannot take the violent pressure. The iceberg packs the crushing physical punch of a granite mountain. As the dense glacial ice scrapes along the steel plates, the weak rivets simply pop off, one by one, under the massive strain. The hull of the unsinkable ship cleanly unzips like a tin of sardines. 6 of the ship's front watertight compartments are immediately slashed open. The ship was only mathematically designed to survive 4. The deliberately lowered bulkheads cannot contain the massive influx of freezing seawater. The Black Ocean is violently pouring in at a terrifying rate of 400 tons every single minute. Captain Smith and the ship's chief architect, Thomas Andrews, rush below deck to personally assess the damage. What Andrews sees is a cold, mathematical certainty. The unsinkable ship is already dead. He looks at the captain and tells him they have at most 2 hours before she sinks entirely to the bottom. Panic begins to slowly poison the ship. Captain Smith, a man used to absolute control, painfully realizes he is about to oversee the violent deaths of more than 1,000 people. His command structure breaks down entirely. He orders the lifeboats to be loaded with women and children first. But in the deafening chaos, his officers drastically misinterpret the order. They believe it firmly means women and children only. Because they never practiced a single lifeboat drill, the panicked crew does not know how much weight the boats can safely hold. The passengers, still fiercely believing the company's promise that the ship is completely safe, refuse to step out into the freezing night. The very first lifeboat lowered into the black water has a capacity of 65 people. It leaves the ship with only 28. As the front of the ship sinks relentlessly deeper, the water uncontrollably spills over the lowered bulkheads, flooding compartment after compartment. The angle of the deck grows steeper. The horrifying realization of death finally hits the crowd. Pure chaos erupts. People fight desperately for the few remaining spaces. The band plays on, a surreal, gentle soundtrack to an unfolding nightmare. Thomas Andrews, the brilliant man who built the ship, is last seen standing quietly in the smoking room, waiting for the end. He makes absolutely no attempt to save his own life.